Good evening, everyone, and welcome to day 4 of our study through the New Testament. Today, we are going to look at an angel promising the birth of Jesus to Mary. It's going to be kind of similar to what we studied about yesterday, with an angel promising the birth of John to Zechariah, but with a few key differences that we're going to hone in on. So, reading from today comes from Luke 1, verses 26 through 38. And here we see the announcement of Jesus' coming birth. This is told from Mary's perspective. And it's interesting. One of the things I talked about earlier as we started this a few lessons back is that Luke 1 has a tendency to show Jesus's, um, what the word I want to use here, but basically his openness toward women, or his inclusion, I can't speak, inclusionness of women. And um, and so it's interesting here. Actually see this perspective, the story from Mary's perspective as it. But if you go to Matthew, which we're going to next week, you see it from Joseph's vantage point. So it's interesting that we see that, and then some of this leads scholars to believe that more than likely there's a very good possibility that Luke actually interviewed or talked to Mary about this experience. And there's a couple other reasons why I say this, and we might think this is, and we'll look at that, especially around Jesus's birth and his childhood. And so there is a good possibility that Luke actually spoke to Mary about the birth, about everything that happened, while he was doing this study and researching to write the book of Luke. We're going to see here that this visit is 6 months after Elizabeth's pregnancy, so 6 months after um, Gabriel visited Zechariah, and so God dispatches him, or sends him, to Nazareth, which is a small little town in Galilee. It's a region north of Judea and Samaria, and so we know that, well, you'll see that Jesus is known as Jesus of Nazareth. So we'll get back to that and see why. So he visits him, and the way Luke words this in verse 27 in the New Living Translation, it's only translated once, virgin. The New American Standard, other versions actually say, Luke, the way that Luke words this, he uses the word virgin twice. And in verse 27, it says, "To a virgin named Mary, she was engaged to be married to a man named Joseph, a descendant of King David." And so it's interesting that, Luke focuses in on that she was a virgin. And this is an important part of the story because it demonstrates that Jesus was, his conception was miraculous. It wasn't just some, random person that was born. She was a virgin, and gave birth to a child. And so we're going to see the evidence for that. Um, Again, she was engaged to Joseph. And this was, engagement was a little bit different back then. It's not like we to go today where two people fall in love and, the man asks them to marry her, or vice versa. But in the culture back then, it was an arrangement. It was an agreed, arranged marriage, and it was a legally binding contract. So I mean, you almost had to go through a divorce process to break this contract. So it wasn't just oh, we're engaged. It was, hey, these families have got together and they have an agreement that, there's sometimes money exchange, there's other things that are exchanged, and so this was a very serious thing that, that's why Luke focuses in on that. And so verse 31, we see, the angel appears to her, and it says, you will conceive, he appears in her head, so you will conceive and give birth to a son, and you will name him Jesus. I'm not going to try to pronounce the Greek word for this. I'm horrible with Greek words. It's in the lessons plan. It's very similar to looking to what we see with Jesus here. But in Hebrew, his actual name would have been Yahshua, or our term today we would use for that is Joshua. And so it's interesting, and it means that the Lord is salvation. If we went back and said, "Hey, where's this Jesus guy?" They would look at you like, "What are you talking about? Who's Jesus?" But it's a translate. His name's a what we call a transliteration into into English, and so it's not a literal translation. So we end up with the English word Jesus there. So I just wanted to give a little bit of background in that. So you sometimes you'll see some back and forth about, well, Jesus wasn't actually Jesus's name, and in the end, we know who we're talking about. We know what we mean. We don't have to use his Greek name. We don't have to use his Hebrew name. It's we know who he is. If you want to use his Hebrew name, if you want to use his Greek name, use it. It still means the same thing. We know who we're talking about. I just kind of wanted to throw that in there. In verse 35, well, actually, I'm going to start with verse 34 here, but I hit on the angel's response to Mary in verse 35. When the angel, or when Gabriel tells her this, Mary says in verse 34, she asks, but how can this happen? I'm a virgin. And so what we're going to see here in verse 35, the angel's response to Mary is a little bit different than the angel's response or Gabriel's response to Zechariah. And so the angel just replied and answered her question. The Holy Spirit will come upon you, and the power of the Most High will overshadow you. So the baby to be born will be holy, and he will be called the Son of God. And so there's a difference between Mary's response and Zechariah's response. Mary's response is more out of puzzlement, out of question, like, I don't understand, right? How's this? I can't have a kid. I'm a virgin. Whereas Zechariah just doubted that it would happen at all. He didn't believe it was going to happen at all. She's just trying to figure out how it's going to happen. And so that's why you see a difference in response from Gabriel here versus his response to Zechariah. The other thing here is there's been a ton of guessing on how did the Holy Spirit conceive, Jesus in Mary's womb. We don't know. No one knows. It was done through the Holy Spirit. That's about as much as we know about it. Maybe one day we'll have a better understanding of how that works. But no, it was different for sure, and it was miraculous, and that's for sure. And so that's what makes Jesus who he is and makes him God. And so maybe one day when we're in heaven, we'll know that. But so. But I did want to focus on the fact that Mary's response was a little bit different. Hers was not of disbelief. Her was more of puzzlement and questioning, trying to figure out how it's going to happen. Versus Zachariah, who just didn't believe it at all. And so then we get into verse 36, where the angel says to her, once more, your relative Elizabeth has become pregnant in her old age. Please, people used to say she is barren, but she is conceived a son and is now in her 6th month. One of the things that we know really here is that Elizabeth was a relative of Mary. The King James Version translates this cousin. I think some other versions may translate this as cousin. We really don't know. The Greek term there is a very general term for relative, so we don't know. There's a big age gap there, so I don't know how close of a cousin that would be if it was a cousin, but somehow Elizabeth and Mary are related, and so we're going to see that, and we're going to see that she goes to visit her. And what I love more than anything here at the end of this is Mary's response in verse 38. Mary responded, I am the Lord's servant. May everything you have said about me come true. And then the angel left her. You've got to understand Mary's predicament here. This would have been a very embarrassing and difficult position because she's engaged to Joseph. She's betrothed to Joseph. And now she's going to possibly, in her mind, could possibly face the stigma of an unwed mother, right? She's going to become pregnant. And I think she understands, or Joseph knows for sure that the child's not his. And she understands if she's starts going, she's going to go around telling everyone, well, an angel of the Lord came to me and I'm a virgin and now I'm pregnant. And, again, this day and age, if someone started doing that, we wouldn't believe it either. So she's got all this, a very difficult position that she's going to be in. And then more than anything, she could be accused of adultery. Joseph could accuse her of adultery, which is punishable by stoning. So she could have been stoned to death. I mean, she had to have that in the back of her mind because of this, but yet she just graciously submits to the will of God. And basically, she says there, I'm the Lord's servant. May everything you said come true. I wish we had that faith. I wish I had that faith. Let me put it that way. Because, what more than anything, if something happens or if someone, we're in a bad situation or we're in some sort of, hard pressed, position, more than anything, we freak out, and a lot of times we will lean on God, but we freak out. We have all these doubts. We have all these things. And, I think if I was in this situation, I'd be asking this angel all kinds of questions. So I'm like, well, wait a minute before you disappear here. But it's just simple. I'm the Lord's servant. May it happen. And so I think we need to focus on that part. I want us to focus on that. I want us that should be the type of faith that we focus to get to and try to get to. as we go through this study. And so, you know, when we're going through these hard times or when we're going through some sort of difficult position, let's remember Mary's response and say, hey, the Lord's with me. I'm the Lord's servant. He's got me. We'll be all right. I hope you have enjoyed this fourth day of lessons. I hope you continue to watch them. I highly recommend that you subscribe. That way, whenever I publish these every day, you'll get an alert that they've been published, and you can follow along with them. If you have any questions, have any comments, please put them down in the chat, or you can reach out to me on multiple of our channels. Hope y'all have a wonderful day. Thank you.